speaking of Fat Amy.
Yeah, I mean, good segue. That the colonel that was relieved of command almost a full year after his mishap.
Yeah, so it's been about 10 days or so, but yeah, so that I read some of that, man. It was to me, so I just look at it from an operator standpoint. Um and I think it's poor. It's a poor look. I mean, you've got a seasoned aviator. He was primarily a Harrier guy. He'd been in since like 93, so he's committed to his country, and he's obviously a professional Marine Corps aviator. And if you look at the failures that he was having in the airplane while in solid IMC conditions, very close to the ground, I don't think he was wrong to eject. I used to teach students all the time. My favorite saying was eject early, eject often, because they're still building jets off the assembly line, but they're not making any more of you. And two, I mean, it's right. I mean, there are two guys that are dead from my rag tour because they ejected like a half a second too late. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So don't delay, right? You always say don't delay your ejection or your decision to eject. And he was at 1900 feet. I mean, you know how it is, mover. We have the minute to live rule, right? So if you're in solid IMC in a fast jet and your instrumentation starts going crazy and you don't know what to trust, what's going on, in a fighter, 1900 foot per minute descent is nothing, right? So I mean,
no, dude. I mean,
his decision, I think, was sound. And then for him to finish that tour, get selected for command at a test squadron, go assume command, like what, a year later, and then the general being like, "Oh, it came back as pilot error. We're going to remove you from command," and with the assumption being, hey, you crashed a perfectly good F-35, or you shouldn't have ejected. I think that's poor. It sends a poor message. I would like to think that maybe there's something else that we're missing that's not out in the public, because, like I said, I just can't imagine any aviator who's been in ejection seat tactical airplanes doing something like that to another aviator. I don't know. Mover, am I crazy?
Eric Smith is the commandant of the Marine Corps.
That's right. Yeah, he got relieved by yes. Is he a pilot?
That's what I was looking at. So he did a whole bunch of stuff. He's a Marine officer instructor.
No. The commandant?
He attended amphibious warfare school.
Yeah, so he was,
he parachutist, rifle expert, pistol expert, Joint Chiefs of Staff, meritorious. Like, no, he's not a pilot. So he's out of his lane.
Yeah, but you would hope that somebody like him would have, I don't know, at least somebody he could talk to, like, a small cabinet, if you will, of people. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about this. He crashed a perfectly good airplane. It cost the Marine Corps a lot of money. What do you guys think? Well, hey, sir, in aviation, this is kind of how it works. I don't know if he had that counsel and if he disregarded it or what, but like I said, from a leadership perspective, like I would hope there was something else going on, but regardless, dude, it sends a poor message, in my opinion, because there's been a lot of guys that have ejected a tenth of a second too late, and I'd rather you just crash an airplane.
So there's a couple things I need to learn. One is not to read the comments, but I do anyway. But some stuff I've seen in the comments, right? Because I've done 2 videos in the last month of Marine things that have happened. And if you read the comments, you kind of get a feel for the public and the ignorance of the public. But then you get a feel for, if you put yourself in the shoes of a reactionary leader, I'm not saying it's the commandant, I'm just saying in general. If you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is swayed by the public, you can kind of see how some of these things start to happen. Because I've read the comments, both the Marine and the Marine Austin event, and with the net jets, and then this thing, and the pitchforks come out almost immediately. And it's interesting because the pitchforks will come out not from a place of knowledge, but a place of anger and emotion and ignorance. For example, one such comment, and I think this is I hate that we do this of the dead, because like you said, right, we'll have somebody eject too late. And what's the first narrative that always comes out? Well, he was doing it to avoid the school. He was
Right,
doing
yeah.
it to avoid this. He was riding it in because he didn't want that. I hate to tell you that, but that is nonsense. We
Yeah,
are not
100%.
trained to worry about what's on the ground when you make that ejection decision. Now, do you? Maybe. But what is worse, losing a jet that's uncontrollable into a school, or losing a jet plus a pilot that's uncontrollable in the school? Because it's going to happen one where, like, the outcome has already been determined. Now it's like, are we saving one less life? That's all it boils down to. That's what that ejection seat gives you. And so the public perception of this when this happens is, and I saw one of these comments like, well, what if that, he ejected over a populated area? What if it had crashed in a school? And I was like, well, it didn't. Well, what if it had? Okay. Well, he's a coward because he used his ejection seat with a flyable aircraft. And it's like, okay, well, how much time do you have in ejection seats? 0. So where is this basis of knowledge from which you were speaking? And then so you back that up to somebody in leadership that is swayed by public opinion. And what is the optic? It's always the optic, right? How does this look? So you back it up to this scenario where the report comes out and it says the pilot screwed up. And they look at it and go, well, I've got this report now that we just lost $110 million aircraft. Pilot screwed up and we couldn't find the damn thing for 12 hours or whatever it was. We gotta, I want some butts. I've had it, I've got to show that I'm doing something. And that is where I hope, need to grow a spine and tell people that they are stupid. Like, you have to tell them, like, look, no. Like, same thing with the Marine thing in Austin, right? I did that video. You and I had different opinions, right? Because I did the video and I said, everybody's wrong. All 3 of them. I said the Marine guys were wrong, the controllers were wrong, and the NetJet guy was wrong too. It's varying degrees of wrong. But the public does not understand nuance. All they see is the last thing you said. And the last thing I said was the NetJet guy was a douchebag for saying that on the radio. And they go, well, you're putting all the fault on him. Like, no, rewind 10 seconds and you'll see where I put the fault on everybody. Well, you can't do that. Well, absolutely you can, because we live in a world where it is not like multiple things can be true at once. And the overwhelming comment to that video was that those Marine fighter pilots need to have their wings pulled, or in one case, the guy said they have their certificates pulled, which is nonsense because they don't have certificates, but have their wings pulled and never fly again. And that, dude, that's the knee-jerk reaction, right? That's the knee-jerk where it's like, mind you, no metal was bent, no paint was swapped, nobody except some hurt feelings. Nothing happened out of that. And the only reason it came to light was because a video came out over a year later. But the public brings out the pitchforks and they want wings. And I asked one of them, I said, are you telling me that they get one mistake in their entire careers? Because you want to pull their wings. They're never going to get it back once you pull it. So,
well, dude, you bring up a lot of good points. I mean, with the F-35 ejection and then, it going missing, and then the guys coming in there in Texas, aviation, every incident, whether it's good or bad, it's always the Swiss cheese model, right? There's always like a plethora of contributing factors that relate to whatever the outcome is, good or bad, right? So, if you look at the, Marine pilot who punched out because, not only was his system displays going wacky and crazy, but there was weather. And guess what? I'm not an F-35 guy, but in the article I read, the procedure, if the aircraft is out of control, is below 6,000 feet, is you eject. And he perceived
Well,
he's
that's
out of
out of control
control.
flight. That's OCF. That's every fighter.
Yeah, but I mean, he perceived that the airplane wasn't responding to the control inputs he was putting in. So, I mean, what I'm getting at is not only is aviation a Swiss cheese model, but when you're making decisions and handling a scenario, there's multiple inputs, that you are taking in to make those decisions. And garbage in, garbage out, right? I mean, obviously his F-35 was flying just fine in the weather, but the information he was receiving wasn't telling him that, right? So, same thing with the guys coming in there in Texas. They asked for unrestricted altitude and airspeed, and the tower gave it to them. I mean, to me, that's pretty clear, right? And then the tower guy said, "Well, I thought you guys were just going to descend in the break." It's like, well, that's not what you know what? So I guess long and short is it's very dynamic, and you can't just sit there and be like it's 1,000% this.
Yeah, I think intent plays a big role in that. Like that's where I think people lose the nuance is, you go to the Marine thing in Austin, and if the intent had been to thump the NetJet guys, and you could say that's what they intended to do, then 100%. They have bad judgment. Don't fly an airplane again. You're out.
Yep.
But if the intent was a miscommunication and they believed what they were doing was safe, because remember, my version of safe and your version of safe are totally different things.
Yep.
And some of it is gray area. It's not defined. The FAA and the military have varying definitions of what safety is. Now, am I defending them? No, because I believe what they did was wrong. I do. But do I think that they need to be removed and never fly again? Absolutely not. You talk to them and say, hey, dude, don't do that. Let's not shine our asses in the pattern. Let's not save our best for coming back to, to the field. We're not a one mistake military, but it was a mistake from the F-35 guy. I mean, dude, it's just like anytime there's an officer involved shooting, right? We don't judge these things with perfect 20/20 hindsight vision. Like you don't. That's the legal standard is what information did he have at the time that he made that decision? Because it could be lethal force. I mean, you could have ejected and that thing had plowed into a school. So we have to look at what that aviator had at the time of the mishap. And the information he had was he had just done a configuration change. He'd gone from Stovall mode, which I think you and I both agree that Stovall mode is a waste in general, but to conventional mode, which, you get that the visual illusion, spatial disorientation, you get all that because now, the jet is cleaning up, reconfiguring. So you're going to have your inner ear stuff going against you. He had 3 times the display had failed and given him master cautions and warnings saying that the flight controls were bad, the air data computer was bad, all these different cascading things. The jet was telling him this jet is not right. The airplane was telling him. Now, if he had gone to the standby, would he have saved the aircraft? Probably. But that assumes that he believed that the standby wasn't one of a multitude of things that were going wrong, because everything else in that airplane, he could have been inverted and not known it. So to judge him based off of perfect 20/20 hindsight, the outcome was the jet kept flying, but he didn't know that. So we got some comments here. Kate says, just sending in love and appreciation to you two, 3 federal veterans. Your guest was magnificent. Here we go. From my understanding, Casey says, it was the deputy commandant for aviation who relieved the pilot of his command, the DCA, as a pilot. So it was a pilot that did that.
Yeah, dude, I don't know, man. I have a hard time with I think it's bullshit. I mean, 100%.
I don't know, but Garrett says, I've been hearing this is not the first incident with this colonel. Also, General Smith is a highly decorated 0302 after meeting him. I respect his decisions. If it was not his first, I'm going to take this down while we talk about it. If it wasn't his first incident, why'd they give him command?
I don't know.
I mean,
do you remember? I don't know. Just thinking about it. Do you remember a couple years ago, VMFA 232, Taj Serene? Remember he
I
took
knew
off in
Taj.
England? Yeah, he
Yeah,
took
that's
off in
exactly what I
England.
was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, his instrumentation failed in the Hornet, and he stayed with it, and he died.
And that is, it's actually what I was talking about, because people said he stayed with it to avoid whatever was on the ground. And that just wasn't the case. They looked at that and they said there's no evidence that suggests that. He just was spatial deed, came out of the weather, and could not get out in time.
I mean, the Hornet's got standby instrumentation too. It's just a case of like, what do you believe? What do you trust? Right? I mean, in his mind, I'm sure he thought he could handle it. Right? That's why he stayed with it. But I just come full circle back to eject early, eject often. They're building new airplanes every day. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
That's how I don't know, man. I I had to give the American flag to a crying family before they put their kid in a 6-foot dirt hole because they didn't eject a half a second sooner. So like I might be a little bit biased towards eject early, inject often, seeing it firsthand and having to go through that whole experience. But in my mind, an ejection seat aircraft, like there's no question that from reading the things that he was dealing with at low altitude in a fast jet, I'm like, dude, 100%. I mean, hey, if you messed up, hey, let's learn from this. Guess what? Lockheed, let's fix whatever it was that caused all these issues. And hey, if there's some additional training we need to do, like, hey, if this happens, focus on this. It's never wrong. Fine. But this is what happens, man, when you get a brand new airplane out to the fleet, right? I mean, they put it through testing, but you can't test real life. So, and the F-16 was no different, right? The Hornet was no different, right? The F-16 and the Hornet were, our NATOPS and the Dash 1 is written in blood, right? Because we learn from these things. So, you like to think that some of those lessons, the guy or gal didn't die, right? So, I mean, to me, it's like, I don't.
And you also have to remember, if I put up a picture of the cockpit in that video, and think about it. You're going from primary, the helmet, which is like using the HUD, to the secondary, which is the big display.
Yeah.
And now you've got to go find the standby at the bottom between your legs.
Yeah, dude.
And transition. But every time you did that, the thing came back and worked and gave you more cautions that told you it wasn't working. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't even know. Like if you're looking at the little peanut and then all of a sudden the displays come back in your helmet, I mean, that's got to be confusing as well. I would like to think that, I have my issues with obviously we've talked about leadership stuff, but I would like to think there was something else that the public's not privy to, because that's not the message you want to send to aviators in the Marine Corps. That's my own opinion, of course.